Hello, welcome to the Midnight Hymn podcast. Today, our numbers continue to multiply, and we keep adding guests. We're on a roll. So we're talking about one of the longest, most difficult Virgin Black songs. And to kick us off, let's introduce. We're going to reintroduce Billy. Say a quick something about yourself.
Hey, I'm Billy. This is my third time on, and if you really want to find out about me, you can listen to some of the other episodes where I have introduced myself in more depth.
That's fair. And then Paul, brand new. You have no excuse. Tell us your entire life story.
Oh, okay. Hello. I'm Paul. So I was born on a rainy night, and I'll skip ahead a little bit.
I was there. It was sunny. It was a sunny night.
I am best known as Billy's little brother and co-author of the book that we Contamination. I'm also a professor of counseling psychology and a mental health counselor, and so I and a psychoanalytic psychotherapist. So kind of inhabit all those worlds of looking at how psychology, psychoanalysis, theology, and philosophy kind of come together. And so I play in that world, teach students how to become therapists, and have a small private practice on the side. I've also randomly recently gotten into an AI startup, but that's a whole separate conversation.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we'll have to talk about that later. Okay, so Ryan is also here. Good job, and as always, I'm Josh. So, so what we usually do is we usually listen to the song. However, I think we decided that that would create such a weird proportion for for this podcast and for our limited time together. So instead, I think I'll put the song at the end of the episode. So for people who don't want to go seek it out, it'll be there for you. And we're just going to kind of launch into analysis mode. If as a listener, you want to get maximum, value from this, I would say pause, look up the song, listen to it, and then come back. We'll wait 17 minutes. No. Ryan, why don't you start us out? You are our analytical mastermind. What do you have to say about this?
Well, this song is one of the lowest viewed song, or shall we say listened to song by Spotify metrics. It's 19 minutes. It's a centerpiece in the overall Elegant and Dying album. And this, I don't know, Josh, if you ever had a chance to look at my sort of systems diagram of this album, but this song sort of represents the beginning, or not so much the apex, whatever the opposite of an apex is, but it's the bottom of a descent. And psychologically, this song is sort of paired up with the cult of crucifixion, which follows it. So you have this sort of two-song pairing, which forms a word pair, the everlasting cult of crucifixion. And so together, they represent this sort of psychological, sort of existential, dare I say, ontological journey into what it means to be human, questions of identity, a lot of imagery around the face and whatnot. And so it's a song that's kind of like a mini play, a theater, play where you sort of listen to it. It's heavily anchored in ambiance and a mood. It's not a song you listen to, all the time. Obviously, to each their own. I'll pause there. It's quite a piece of work, and I wanted to reach out to Paul in particular because one of his areas of study is Jacques Lacan. Did I say the first name right?
Yep.
And I have a personal friend who's a Lacanian analyst and philosophy professor and an amazing human being, and he has also influenced me some. So between Paul and my friend in my personal life, I've had some exposure to Lacan, and I don't know, as I had experienced the everlasting, I kept, I've been listening to this album since I was in my 20s, and it's been almost 25 years. And I actually did a MySpace blog back in 2008 when I was going through my epistemic crisis of sort of deconstruction and whatnot. And I'm able to follow my experience of this album and this song. And I went back and read, what I had written back in 2008. And it's easy to, Christianize, at least in my background, and map this song to my internalized meaning-making apparatus, which was heavily influenced by sort of evangelical, born-again Christianity. And as I've evolved as a person and learned more about how our consciousness is structured and what it means to be a human and the split self that Lacan talks about and lack and desire, I thought this was a good opportunity to maybe explore looking at this through kind of a different lens. And so I reached out to Paul after having had Billy as a guest, and he was gracefully accepted. And so here we are.
Here we are. Can I add a quick, structural note? I just want to talk about the anatomy of the song real quick. So I feel like it can kind of ground some of all the places we're going to launch off of. But it is very ambient and atmospheric at the start. There are a lot of long, pregnant pauses. There's very sparse musical notes. Drums don't come in till, well over halfway through. At some point it starts to get to the point where you can tap your toe a little bit to it. But for the most part, it is very much structured like an unfolding, and it starts very sparse. And there are a lot of vocal textures in there, a lot of which sound mysterious. There's backward masking. There's, Latin chanting. There are all sorts of opaque obscurants that are in the mix. And that is, I think, important just to note that we're not, when we launch into what we're going to be launching into, which is a lot of, analytical breakdown of conceptual things, I think it's important to keep that within the frame of the aesthetic that is being attempted here, right? They didn't write a sermon to be delivered, right? This is an emotional experience to be embodied and traveled through with them. And I think I'll leave it there. I would love to hear any of Paul's thoughts. Were any of the words in here, or even moods, feelings, whatever, did it spark anything, knowing, that we selected you specifically for your Lacanian perspective?
Yeah, so I'll say I'm not, this is one of my first exposures to Virgin Black, so I'm going to be coming at this a little bit more from looking mainly at this song as opposed to sort of in context of a lot of their other work, so I'll own that in the beginning. But even, Josh, just to pick off of what you said there, what I found really interesting in it is how much I didn't understand in my first several listenings to it. Like, I didn't know what words they were saying, and I kind of decided to listen to it and then look at the lyrics and then listen to it and kind of just allow my first impression of it. And part of what that struck me was one of the things Lacan talks about is in psychoanalysis, you want to resist understanding a little bit. When you think you know what your patient's saying, you actually fill in the words, and we stop listening for what else is being communicated in our words. And it's actually in the inability of us to ever fully say what we think we mean that we actually get to where the unconscious is speaking, where there's more coming through. And so what I heard actually in the chanting that I didn't understand, and sometimes in understand the ways that the vocals were masked, and even in what I heard the music itself communicating, was very ambiguous. And I actually really liked that. I think that it opens itself up much more poetically to much more possibility, as opposed to Brian, like you were saying, sort of the evangelical world I was raised in, of let's get to what it actually means. Let's distill everything down to what's the takeaway, what's the Aesop's fable version of this song. It all boils down to this moral. And so I think it leaves you unsettled, which I think the song is actually trying to do. It is really unsettling because you don't actually know what you just heard, and you're trying to grasp it, but it doesn't quite land. And so I think in that the song is helping you resist understanding it, which keeps you open to listening for more.
So beautifully said, Paul. And Billy, I want to hear your perspective here. But you just described the essence of what Virgin Black, that you can't pin them down. So many people get frustrated by this band. They have a three-piece Requiem, which is entirely classical. They have Gothic sort of metal from the 90s, industrial. They mix all these genres, and people have struggled to try to label them and pin them down. And they're being their authentic self. But yeah, like you just nailed a lot of it. It's not something you do a disservice to yourself, the band and the music, when you try to put it in this box of meaning that we often try to make associations with.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to add to that real quick. I think that the what you're talking about as this kind of being the center, or the, well, now I can't think of the opposite of apex. Is it the delta? Is it the whatever that lowest point is? It is sort of a, like in my mind, sort of an ethereal swirling structure, more like a galaxy than like a wheel hub or something. It lacks cohesive structure in the sense that you would expect a central pillar of a larger work to hold. And I just think that's important to call that out.
Mm-hmm.
Billy,
any thoughts?
Everyone's dying to hear, not just me and Josh. Like the whole Midnight Hymn, fan base. All 50 of us are like, all right, Billy.
Need to know what Billy Horde thinks. Who's barely given the entire album a listen through once. So I don't have I really liked what Paul had to say. I usually do. This is why I read a book with him. But I don't have the trained analyst approach. And in fact, in some ways, you could almost say that as in my vocation as a high school teacher, there's almost sort of the opposite, is to like trying to hear for the best of what's there when a student is offering is something, because so often you're trying to like pull some kind of shred of truth out of a just ridiculously wrong statement so that you can kind of validate it and move forward sometimes. Which is only to say that I didn't, what I tried to focus on was what I could, how is it hitting me, right? Because there's so much time in the song that is sort of space. And it's space filled with sound, or it's space filled with this kind of sort of pregnancy. And I wanted to kind of say, well, what is that doing in me, right? And so, in a probably horribly making Lacan spin in his grave, I went and named it. I was like, what do I call this? The effect this is having on me. And so for me, I kept coming back to just haunting, and I think that's one of the lyrics in the song. Right?
Oh yeah.
It's the and so vocally, musically, more music, vocally and musically. And also lyrically, but focusing on the vocals, the chanting. It's the experience of being haunted, and it had me thinking about this because I really liked I'm gonna riff on the whole evangelicals trying to find the right answer thing, and what I like is the inversion of a kind of expectation along those lines, right? So there's this, I think there is a popular evangelical way to talk about the haunting of God, right? And I want to say the literary references I was picking up here are sort of Francis Thompson's Hound of Heaven, was the really big vibe that I was sort of getting off of this. But what it was doing for me was not was reminding me that when you are haunted by something, that is not a positive experience in the moment. We often retroactively try to make it positive. Especially if we are being haunted by something that, and I'm just gonna by a eucontaminant, right? When we're being haunted by something that in the end is gonna have a positive effect on us, but we only know that in retrospect. We then turn around and say, well, it was sort of good. I was I could hear the desire in my soul calling to it, and I don't think that's 100% untrue. But I think it downplays the kind of abject horror, the kind of numinous horror of the experience itself. Right. And so I'm also bringing my own experience, again, my experience of transness to listening to this song. Right. And so it had resonances of it felt musically like some of the darkest moments of knowing who I am and having and this dawning awareness that the only way to move forward was going to be embrace that, and that meant death to the life that I had built and lived, and the way that I was known, and the comfortable, persona that I was showing up in the world with, right? So that sense of haunting is this horror. It's the genuine fear of death. But, and to get theological and kind of do the thing that I do, right? it's only on the other side of it that we can be sort of assured that life is on the other side of that death. Even when on this side of it, we might believe, we might have hope, we might have some kind of like something we're clinging on to, that there will be life on the other side of death. And then you have this dawning realization as all the sides are closing in on you, that there's no life on this side of death. Like that it's death or it's a slower death. And this kind of feeling closed in, feeling penned in, feeling hunted down, sort of form of being haunted, right? Like the genuine horror and like where you can feel that panic welling up kind of in that deep behind your gut part of you, was the kind of experience that I wanted to put to the listening to of this piece for me.
It reminds me of the way these lyrics bookend. Near the beginning, it says the air is dense behind me, and near the end, the air is dense before me. Where you really do meet that sort of event horizon, I think, that you're describing, where the decision is all but made. You could continue to fight it, and I think that's why the very last line of this song is, but can I embrace? It ends with a question. Because this is not where the album ends. This is not where the conceptual sort of framework of the album ends. So, I want to hear more from Paul. He's our new guest.
Well, yeah. I was thinking about the same thing. Like, Paul, as you think of this, well, part of how we're all here is, the real, maybe talk about the symbolic, the real, and the imaginary, Paul. And the real is always challenging because it's like that's the one thing you can't really put into language. And so this song, it just strikes me as this sort of circling of something that's inarticulate, inexpressible. And it's one of the things I appreciated about it is, despite its length, I love the fact that it's doing it a disservice, and I love the fact that they're using this word, the everlasting, which doesn't traditionally accompany the whatever concept whatever entity or thing that is being experienced that's doing the haunting. So, any perspective you have through that sort of Lacanian lens that stood out to you?
Yeah, no, there's a lot. I think it's sort of like where do we dive into here? I think maybe just to start with what you were teeing me up for there on the imaginary, symbolic, and the real. I can give some definitions of what we mean by that, because it gets confusing because we don't actually mean, when we say the real, it's actually not reality as we think of reality versus imaginary. That confuses quite a bit of people. But the imaginary and the symbolic, they actually have to do with linguistics and how language shapes us as subjects, as individuals, as conscious beings. And so the imaginary and the symbolic work together as to create essentially the world as we understand it, as we experience it. It creates both how we see things. When I see you, I think I see you. I have now an image of who I think Ryan is. And then the symbolic is sort of like the rules of why those images mean something to me, why the microphone means something, and why certain getting your voice loud suddenly has meaning in comparison to having it quiet. It's how these images then interact with each other, and then meaning comes from that. The real then is everything that can't be said in that way. And so one of the Lacanian, kind of real basic Lacanian premises is that language always fails. And that failure is actually productive and beautiful and necessary. And so instead of that being a problem to overcome, that's actually part of what keeps us talking and keeps us communicating. It's part of what it's actually what gives us the capacity to love, which is a whole nother line we can go down later. So the real then is that which is always pushing in. It's always pressing in for expression, yet as soon as we think we can name it, as soon as I'm like, aha, that's the real, because it's now something speakable, because it's now something thinkable, what we're doing is actually we're taking it and we're adjusting our imaginary symbolic to be able to talk about it, but that means it's no longer the real.
Yep.
And so it's not something that you can ever fully capture, which I think gets a little bit into this song. It's something that you can never tame, you can never make sense of completely, because as soon as you made sense of it, it's no longer that. And I think the song does quite a few really interesting things with that. Well, so maybe to back up, art in general, I think, is an attempt to help us have an experience of the real. And that's what I think differentiates art from, I think we talked about propaganda in the book, Billy. Did we do that, or we just have conversations about it? Where we propaganda starts with a message. It starts with a moral. It starts with what I want you to get, and then creates an aesthetic around it so that you'll to communicate that as best as possible to influence somebody. Whereas art begins with something inexpressible and then finds the least worst way to try to express that to other people. And for some artists, that's paint. For some artists, that's music. And for some artists, that's poetry. But you can never exhaust a work of art because you can never fully name the real that it's trying to expose into you. So, we could spend the next week talking about this song, and we will never actually exhaust what they're doing in it. Which would be fun, but I'd get hungry. But so
it seems like the one. Just to interject, it seems like the one line that perfectly encapsulates what you're talking about is "I see the face of," and then ellipses.
Yeah,
which is exactly what you're saying.
Well, and didn't I think you put in one of the notes that I peeked at, Josh? Didn't you put that it sounds like he's saying God?
Yeah.
In that moment, like you hear, but they actually didn't put that in the words in the CD jacket.
Yeah,
which I also think is really fascinating. What are they even playing with the presence and absence of what we imagine God to be? My association there goes to Meister Eckhart's prayer to God to rid me of God. Mm-hmm. And this sort of play with language that's happening in there, in the limitations of any understanding of God, any speaking of God, never fully gets at that which is God. It's that apophatic theology versus the cataphatic.
Absolutely.
You're going to have to define those words. You can't just throw those out there.
Okay, well, Billy, you're the theologian. You're the one I got them from.
Sure. Okay. So I love this one because I have whole theories around it that I'm not going to get into. Apophatic theology is theology that is rooted in the understanding that anytime we say a word, actually this is very Lacanian before Lacan, anytime we say a word, anytime we express an idea, we are expressing an idea that is fundamentally limited, right? So like the kind of core Christian statement, God is love, is one of the fun ones to do this with, right? As soon as I say God is love, you have concepts in your head, right? There's a bunch of things come flooding into your head for what that means. And however good your theology is, you could have the best theology in the world, those concepts will still be inadequate to say what God is, to define, describe, contain God. Therefore, it is, on some level, more accurate to say God is not love in the sense of saying God is not the thing that just
I was going to ask, is that
God
basically
is
via
that,
negativa
right?
sort of thing?
Right. This is the via negativa stuff. Right. Absolutely.
Okay.
So apophatic theology is theology that is built around the inadequacy of language and even thought to contain the fullness of the object of God that we're talking about. Whereas cataphatic theology, in its best form, is not like just playing like second fiddle to that. I would say actually argue that in its best form, cataphatic theology is aware of that limitation and therefore positions itself as pointing in a direction rather than claiming to identify a location. Right? It says so we can't say accurate things about God, but we can use words, languages, concepts to point in a direction that moves us closer to God. So but short version, that's apophatic and cataphatic theology. Cataphatic theology uses images, language to try to say positive things about God. So God is love is cataphatic theology. God is not love is apophatic theology. And good theologians will tell you that both of those are true at the same time.
Similar to air being dense before you and behind you.
Very, very similar to that.
All right, Paul.
Touch but never held.
Or I see the face of God spoken, but the object left out on the lyrics sheet because it both is and is not sufficient to name the experience of the singer.
Yeah.
Paul, you were on a tear, and I want to hear the rest of that rip.
Okay. Where else are we going to go? Well, actually, so even as we're on this sort of side quest on language, it actually takes me. Billy and I have been talking quite a bit about Lewis and Lewis's relationship with language, where he in one of his letters he writes that we can only be the most precise. Like language becomes more precise only when we're talking about abstract things. The closer we get to the real, like the objective world, the less precise our language becomes. And I think that speaks, in many ways, it comes out in this song for me a little bit, but it also kind of speaks to sort of Lacan's relationship with language, which is that the song, I think I experience it as talking about a very visceral experience. Like it isn't, I wouldn't say it's a comfortable experience to listen to this song. It pulls something out of me that I don't have clear words for. I don't have a clear way to talk not because the thing is so abstract, but actually because it's so rooted in my gut, and actually for me, actually kind of right here in my chest is sort of where I feel this sort of hollow, empty kind of aching when I listen to it. And I think that's kind of what Lewis is talking about, is that if I just try to analyze this song and tell you just what it means, I'm never going to get there, because I'm going to have to be using words that are actually better served describing that which isn't real than that which is actually real and felt and experienced. So, I don't know, just sort of like that. That was kind of where my mind went as Billy was explaining epiphatic and cataphatic there. Do we want to go back to the song or play around a little bit more?
Well, I want to ask maybe a dumb question real quick, which is, so the real, as construed by Lacan, is that the proper? I'm failing to come up with words. Is is it the correct enmeshment of interpretation and I'm sorry, I forgot what the imaginary and the symbolic. Is that what the real is supposed to be, or is it a different thing altogether?
The real is just that which they can't contain. Sometimes I've used like 3 dimensions to talk about it. Like if the imaginary symbolic can tell you one side of my cup, there's always going to be a side you can't see that's inaccessible.
Yeah.
And in some ways you feel its experience. You can try to imagine what it's there, but you can never. As soon as you turn to look at it, something else falls out of you. The real is never anything we can fully get our hands around, but it's always pressing in. The other way to teach on it that I've used, I borrowed this from Zizek, where he talks about the game of chess. The imaginary of chess is medieval combat. Pawns are shield walls, knights are knights charging in, and you're having this like medieval combat. The symbolic of chess, the rules, are how the pieces move and what you're trying to do. That a pawn attacks diagonal but moves forward, that a knight does this funny L shape, right? Because you could reimagine chess as like Peanuts characters, and it's still chess, as long as their relationships stay the same. The real of chess, though, would be, is it being played at a grandmasters playing each other, or is it me playing my 6-year-old? Mm-hmm. Because the rules may be the same, but the context and the meaning and everything else that affects the game is going to be completely different. And chess itself has no way of expressing, am I being played for money, or am I being played to teach a lesson? Am I being played in therapy? Am I being played, by 2 people on a business trip? It completely changes what happens and the meaning of what happens, but the game itself has no way of expressing it. But it's always impacting every part of it.
I would say I've got it, but that would be counter to the point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those. I keep circling it, and every time I explain it, I think, no, I don't think I'm getting it quite yet. And I'm like, I kind of keep circling around it myself.
Glancing blows or out of the periphery, right? I think that was one of the notes that I made about the musical experience, especially with that little piano riff. It gives me that tingling sense of like something's just out of my eyesight, and if I turn to look, it's not there, but I feel that presence, which is Anyway,
which is what the song is talking about a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
That presence.
What about the line, my muted children testify? That was a very interesting line. Did anyone, how did you all experience that, or how do you approach processing that line in the context of an experience as opposed to maybe, cognition? Thinking of myself, I had a hard time with that one. Does anyone have any thoughts or anything? It's when we were planning for this episode. I was trying to put on my Lacanian hat, and I don't know. Well, we're going to probably have to edit this, Josh, because this is going to be unintelligible.
The struggling is part of the beautiful process, Ryan. That's...
Yeah. I don't know. I had multiple versions of me that I was accessing. I was thinking back to sort of, Great Commission evangelicalism, and trying to persuade people to convert to to say the sinner's prayer. And as I've evolved as a person, it's like I've totally dropped the desire to influence how anyone else sort of thinks about the world, or to influence what we would call their belief. and to focus more on how I treat people, how I relate to them, how I connect to their humanity, and how I sort of participate in their flourishing through recognition, through empathy, through just being with, suffering with. And that incarnational engagement with humanity, all of humanity, to the extent that I still have spheres of individuals that I have a hard time figuring out how to apply that to. Politicians, suicide bombers, whatnot. But nonetheless, is this notion of, sort of works. Faith without works is dead. And so when I was thinking of, yet my muted children testify, I had a part of me that was interpreting that or experiencing that as sort of, I'm not sure what the scripture is nowadays, but around that sort of James epistle and sort of like how you treat people rather than how you try to use apologetics or shame or other tactics to influence how somebody thinks. That was one thought, and then I had this Lacanian thought, which again is probably an absolute perversion. So correct me. Is the symbolic is so inadequate to but just by definition of the real as we've defined it is you're almost forced to if you're in any relationship to the real, you almost have to be mute. Because any language, as we've discussed, is inadequate. And so that was the other angle I was holding, as I was preparing for this is, holy cow, it makes sense. I've held my first definition, for the last 10 years. And upon preparing for this episode, I kind of had a new perspective on it that I hadn't had, in the past. All right, edit all that out, Josh.
Nope, staying in. I want to bounce off that because I also struggled a lot with that because anyone who listens to this podcast regularly will know that, obscure lines are like catnip to us and we want to decode and turn it into the real. And always, we pay lip service to not wanting to nail things down, but our brains want to nail things down. Come on. And so, yeah, when I take it in conjunction with the previous, within the whole context, not the whole, a little bit more context, the line is hiding in corners, it conjures none but fear, yet my muted children testify the everlasting. And so what I'm thinking based on what I heard you say, I'm feeling more like this is my primal childhood senses that I have since repressed, buttoned down, nailed down in an attempt to define the world. But those childhood senses, they can tell this is the everlasting or the real or the God or what have you. And this whole chase scene that this song seems to be, that's kind of how it makes me feel. It's a chase scene. And there's Scrabbles and falling over fences onto garbage cans and what, there's this whole scene that kind of plays out in my mind as it goes through. But in this sense, it's like, this is the recognition that what is pursuing me is real and valid, and my experience with it is warranted, whatever that experience is. My adult perceptions of the world preclude that. No, it's just fantasy. I've got my scientific explanations for things or my psychological, whatever framework we want to put on it, but we're good at boxing things up. And so this is the anti-boxing line. That's how I'd put it.
I think, and maybe this is just, I'll have fun with this for a second, but I looking at that whole stanza, the sound of, the use of the letter C, I thought was just really interesting. And you bring in the bigger context. There's a presence that clamors and the darkness clings and coils. It's hiding in corners. It conjures. A little bit later, it's cacophonous. And it is this hard...
Cacophonous chatter.
cacophonous chatter. Well, and even there, it's interesting. Like children uses a C and chatter uses a C, but it's a softened C. It's a ch sound as opposed to a k sound. And that I don't know. There's something about being caught. It's coming for you, and it's this sort of, I don't know, feels as if it's hidden in the use of sounds. And even in that, a lot of those are actually noisy. It's cacophonous and it's clamorous, and yet the children are muted, and there's not a sound to my ears, but he's deafened. I don't know that there's something within that I don't know gets distilled into, oh, it means this, as much as an experience of these C's, this like kind of being caught, of being chased, coming of this presence that clamors kind of coming after you.
I
even describing it, I keep hearing myself using the k sound. Like there's something about it that is catchy, or comes after you.
Well played there, Paul.
Yeah,
See what you did there, Paul.
it wasn't totally on purpose.
Go ahead, Billy. Yeah, I want to hear from you.
No, I don't know. So for me, this was, I think I said earlier that, like, to me the literary reference for the piece is just so strongly Francis Thompson's Hound of Heaven. Like I couldn't divorce from that. So I was thinking about it, and while we were talking, I was like, isn't there a children reference in Hound of Heaven? Sorry, go ahead.
I don't know what that is.
Okay.
I mean,
You should go. I'm going to read a section of it to you just now. So this is a poem by, I think Francis Thompson was like actually a pretty tragic figure, but The Hound of Heaven is a poem that is to do with the experience of being sought by God and trying very, very hard to evade that, and sort of failing ultimately. But there is I did find the text I was thinking about, the portion of it. It's a long poem, the portion I was thinking about, and I'm gonna read it because I'm actually, now I really want y'all's reaction to this. So in The Hound of Heaven is his like metaphor for like the pursuer that is trying to get him, and he is very much running away, and he's trying everything he can to escape. And at one point he says, "I sought no more after that which I strayed in face of man or maid, but still within the little children's eyes seems something that replies, they at least are for me, surely for me. I turned me to them very wistfully. But just as their young eyes grew sudden fair with dawning answers there, their angel plucked them from me by their hair." Right? It's that, and the poet is experiencing this, like he's turning one way and another for somebody who will like take him in and give him shelter from this, the Hound of Heaven. And he keeps finding everybody that he thought would be on his side keeps being swept away from him just as he thinks he's about to get shelter with them. Right, so like I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about these the muted children testifying, right? To me, is the experience of children, like I think they were about to offer me some kind of solace, and then that is prevented from me. Like I'm not right, and so the testimony being this like silence. It's the testimony of unprovided solace or unprovided welcome or comfort or aid. Right, that even here, even in the innocence of children, there is nothing that will keep me safe from this thing that I both profoundly want and am most profoundly afraid of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going with Billy's reading. I believe, Billy, you
Go read Hound of Heaven. You're gonna love it. Oh my gosh.
yeah, I like the title for sure, so I probably will. What to me, we have sort of the beginning of the song, which is Paul noted all the use of C's, the haunting, and then you have this fulcrum moment, why can I never rest from this aloof pursuer? All the music stops and he just sings that line from the depths of his being. Please give me my peace. Dun, 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 dun. And then the song starts to transition where the language subtly shifts, or I waken to find it looming, touched but never held. And the song moves from that of sort of haunting and being pursued to relationality. Like the language shifts where the protagonist is somehow in relationship, and it hits somatically at a different register with mourning, with sacred tears. And of course the music changes where you start now getting the metal and the drums, are like whips, and so it's almost like inverted, when the lyrics I would have expected to have less metal music accompanying it in sort of that second stage, but instead we have that. It kind of sort of registered sort of crucifixion type symbolism musically, if not lyrically. I don't know, what was y'all's experience with that sort of bifurcation and with that line and sort of what comes after it and how it changes in the sort of register of relationality as opposed to sort of fleeing and being pursued?
Well, I'll jump in. I think the word aloof is really fun and really fascinating in there, because what it, I think, and I would argue that it in many ways is that switch, because part of what happens is suddenly realizing the pursuer, it's not about the singer anymore, that the pursuer is aloof, that there's been this entire world built about being chased, being haunted, being going after, and and then suddenly it's like, but wait a minute, they're aloof, and it's as if the subject of the singer is suddenly turning around and actually like, wait a minute, maybe I want you to be chasing me. So I'm thinking, analytically, I'm thinking about, there's a line that Winnicott, one of the popular analysts, said that it's a joy to, in talking about hide and seek, it's a joy to be hidden, and it's a disaster to never be found. And this idea of where he suddenly realized this pursuer is aloof, and so what I hear happening is the singer actually turning around in some ways and trying to have a confrontation, trying to actually relate, and whereas the beginning, that relationship is mediated by a running away, by wanting to see the other as this scary, this faceless one that's roaming for my soul. So at that moment, there's a turn, and suddenly it's always there. It's been looming, touched but never held, and its hand stops my breath. The presence has already been there, and to me, the role of fantasy starts getting really important here, as there's this reorientation. I don't get the sense that the faceless one has changed what they're doing at all. What's changed is the singer's relationship and experience of that, and the fantasy they're telling themselves about what this means and about what's going on. And I think part of what they're beginning to recognize is having a confrontation with their own desire. Their desire for connection, for something, and then the inability of that desire to ever fully be met.
Here we go.
Love
Yes,
it.
Paul. Desire, lack. All right, now we're
Now
getting
into more look on.
I knew it.
Look on.
Yeah, forget the real. Let's throw that away. Let's get to desire and lack. That's great, Paul. I agree. I didn't pick up on the word aloof. I kind of just skimmed past it, but that you gave language to that I didn't have that makes sense. Yeah, it's almost like they're no longer fleeing. It's a difference of proximity that changes. So,
well, and even that line, "Please give me my peace," right? You can read it a bunch of different ways. Is it a scream, a demand, "Leave me alone, give me my peace," which isn't your presence, or is it "Give me my peace," which includes your presence? And where is this idea of peace? So have they turned around and are screaming, "Don't leave me"? Or are they like, "Give me this thing that only you can give me"? Or are they saying like, "Leave me alone, give me my peace"?
Yeah, it's interesting musically, the way that lyric is sung. It is almost in resignation and exhaustion, and yeah, maybe it is acceptance. And then the next riff that plays, very reminiscent of the next scene, the next day, whatever. It feels like you could imagine that title coming up on the screen, and then it's like, oh, I'm awake and it's looming. So
it's interesting because this whole album covers a scene. We did end The Kiss of God's Mouth, where the song ends. The setting of the individual is laying, all is dark, all is blackened, all but an upturned face. Josh, if you remember, at the end of "And the Kiss of God's Mouth," where there's this scene where an individual is laying in a field looking to the sky, and the the follow-on song to end the Kiss of God's Mouth is Renaissance. Renaissance is the song that precedes the everlasting. Okay, and here is what the Renaissance says that is a clue to Paul's point. And I looked to the air, but the breeze was not cold. I sought for your hand to hold on to me. I lay awakened, the dew on my brow. Come, take my life, God, I'm dying. And then here's the line. And the spirits of slumber lulled at my side. They tormented my world and praised at my grave. I gave them a portion in pursuance of my peace, but they took it and broke it. Where is my hope? And of course, the way he sings it, I'm just speaking in plain old English, the intonation by which that line is sung is an interpretive lens for Paul's point on sort of turning around and facing the olive pursuer and that pleading. I mean, the way he sings that line is a clue into the orientation by which, they're approaching him. I'll zip it for a second.
Oh, that's good. I think this may be the episode that has maybe turned me around on a song the most that we've had. So this is fantastic. I'm loving it.
I knew you can't bring Paul and Billy on and not just have your complete meaning-making apparatus just obliterated, and all you're left with is lack and desire and reorienting your relationship to that. But Paul, tell us a little bit more about desire and, that's really the opening, and that's where a lot of your writing is oriented towards.
Yeah, happy to talk about that. So I was staring at the words, thinking about things, so I'm going to switch my mind back over. Desire itself is often confused. We think of desire about the thing we want. If I want a cheeseburger, I think that my entire desire is sort of about that object, about the cheeseburger. But what Lacan points to is that misses the actual cause of desire, which is my hunger. There's a lack within me. The fact that I'm not complete, that I'm not whole, is why I even start wanting in the first place. And then what fantasy does is give me a way to direct the energy of that lack. My hunger starts, and then my mind kicks in to say, oh, you're hungry. What you want is a cheeseburger because you want the fat, and you want the taste, and you want the cheese, and you want the salt. And so, the cheeseburger is what you want. And so I end up kind of playing this game with myself where I think the cheeseburger is what's drawing me. The cheeseburger is just a placeholder to orient this sensation, this deep inner unsettledness, which for a cheeseburger hopefully isn't that too existential. But when we get to where does desire itself come from? It comes from the fact that we actually aren't who we think we are. We are actually, in the language of this song, we are actually faceless. That our identities never fully map, never fully capture who we are. Lacan's playing with the famous "I think therefore I am." He plays with it and goes, "I think therefore I am not." So the part of you that thinks, the part of you that defines yourself, the part of you fill up your social media profile, that's not fully you.
Just
that's
obliterating yourself in the very act of defining. Yeah.
Exactly. And so in some ways the faceless, is in a lot of I go to horror movies or what are the guards from Harry Potter, that these black faces, they're the ghost of Christmas yet to come, those faces you can't see, as these kind of terrifying creatures. But even in this song, there's a switch. The faceless haunts me at the end of that verse. Isn't, and maybe at least in my reading, my experience, is almost this shift from the faceless being this horror to actually this recognition about, I hear faceless as a lack of identity, as a loss of I don't know who I am. We look at the face of the other to actually understand ourselves for recognition. As we in psychoanalysis, we talk about, typically it's the mother or the early caretaker's smile that mirrors back the identity to the child. And so when you look at the faceless one, you lose a sense of who you are. But who am I? And I think the song is actually opening us up and leaving us in, as you said, that in the inverse of the apex, it's leaving us in this, actually, wait a minute, what if there's actually something actually generative in this loss of who you think you were supposed to be, of who you think you are, in your own facelessness?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna ask another dumb question to trying to grapple with.
Sorry, I'm going in a lot of different
with,
directions here.
with my mental map of of how this Laconian operation works, because it sounds very similar to thesis, antithesis, synthesis territory, right? Where you're not going to access the real in any let's see, permanent way. You're getting glances of it. Is that the idea? And every time you try to bite a chunk off and put it in your definitional box, by necessity, it's going to intermingle with your interpretation and your imagination.
Yeah, and in fact, so Lacan talks about these eruptions of the real, where it breaks into, so with an I, eruption, and that when the real breaks into our world, we have a word for that, and it's called trauma.
Yeah, it's destabilizing.
That it's this disturbance. It's when something is you don't have words for it, but something's off. I think you used the word deconstruction earlier, Ryan. I think for many people of faith, when something happens, you don't even know what it was, but your old way of holding your faith, of understanding the world, stops working. And we work really hard to okay, I'm going to shut that down. Maybe I'll work really hard. Maybe I'll memorize a bunch of things. Maybe I'll go to a bunch of seminars and try to rebuild my sandcastle of belief. But when the real erupts in there, it's this destabilizing, everything gets formatted. And you can either keep trying to resist it, and that leads to what we would call symptoms and other kinds of problems and obsessions and anxiety and depression, goes in lots of different directions. Or you can allow the destabilization to rework your world. And that's what I think good faith deconstruction actually is when we allow the world we thought it was, the facades we had built up that worked good enough for us for a time, to fall apart and something else to come up. And often that comes through this confrontation with, oh, I'm not who I thought I was. My desire isn't about what I thought it was. There's much more to it. And it's terrifying and disturbing and unnerving.
Josh, it's your experience of Our Wings Are Burning and the period of your life, that Lacan's language would say you brushed up against the real, and it completely was an epistemic crushing where, all of that was just obliterated. That would be, in Lacanian language, you don't ever capture the real, you brush up against it, and it's traumatic, destabilizing. That's my understanding, which I think is in line. So that's to kind of map it more to the extent that I've gotten to know you, Josh. It's similar, to me. We both have talked, Paul, about a stage in our lives where when we went through our deconstruction, it was in the context of divorces, and our whole Christian faith at the time was it was an unmooring that was catastrophic in many ways, at least for me. I don't want to speak for Josh.
That's a good word for it. Also scarred, but perfect and beautiful. That would be another way to put it.
Go Josh. All
Yeah.
right. There we go.
Way to bring us back.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Can I just I just want to
Please.
ask Paul a question. Sorry. That was the first time I'd heard Paul put that way. In that context, and actually I think this does fit in with the song as well, but I just want to ask Paul, okay, so then, given all of that, what percentage of the people that we might think of right now as toxic Christians are actually just traumatized atheists building sandcastles of false faith to help themselves not confront the reality of a trauma of their own experience?
From this lens, probably a high proportion is what I would say, because and I think they're maybe the better word for them would be idolaters than atheists. That what they've done is they've created an image of a God that structures, that organizes their world, that fits in the gap that the real poked in their world, and they created a God to fit that, to maintain their stability. So what's primary is the world the way I want it to be. And so I'm going to craft an idea of a God and worship that's going to help stabilize that. And I will sacrifice then myself, my friends, whatever else at the altar of maintaining this illusion of my world. And I think that actually is, that's idolatry.
And I think that is actually the beauty of specifically this kind of music, right? Like the music that we end up describing as unsettling, as troubling, right? Like, because it is art that comes from a place of like unwillingness to paper over that eruption of the real, that trauma, right? And instead, it almost obsessively is like almost neurotically like studying it and making art out of it and like memorializing the trauma. And I know that can go to like bad places, but I think there's also like this good like I refuse to paper over this thing that happened, and instead I'm going to make art about it. I'm going to try to like bring up something akin to or echoing that experience in those that experience my art. And I think that is, and so I think like having a discipline of sitting with the kind of music and the kind of poetry and the kind of visual arts and movies that unsettle in this way. I again, my mind, the one that the piece of art that does this for me the most right now in my life is shoot. It's not called The Pink Opaque, but it's the one with the pink opaque in it. Paul, what is the name of that movie?
I know which one you're talking about.
Lost in TV.
Yes.
That one.
Yep.
Movie.
Glow.
Somebody
I saw the
remember
TV
movie?
Glow.
I saw the light TV
I saw
glow.
TV
Yes.
Glow. Yep.
Yes.
That, which does the same thing from
Yeah.
a very like trans perspective. But I think it is another piece of art that is doing this thing of
100%.
I have been haunted by a longing, and it is profoundly troubling, and it is destroying my world, and I don't know what to do with it, but I'm going to tell everybody about it.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of described me. I'm getting almost creeped out about, I've been this Virgin Black fanboy for so long now. It's
By now, you've got to be a fan man. Like you gotta drop the boy at some
well,
point.
yeah. I need to drop that whole identity. I think I'm freaking out potentially. Seska and Rowan and that whole crew. So, but that's really well said, Billy, for sure. You really nailed a number of. There's when I read YouTube comments in the past, there's just a lot of people across the world that have resonated with the interiority and the inner architecture that this music represents, which it's not for the masses, and that's okay. They don't want to be that, but it's some of their songs. I mean, the way they've captured in music the experience of spiritual abuse. I mean, if you go back, Josh, to the Trance EP, I'm not sure if you're that familiar with that one.
Yeah.
The
Love
song "Whispers of Dead Sisters" is, I mean, how do you write good music about spiritual abuse? Like, it just seems like you don't musically capture that. That song is just, the word I'm going to say, Josh.
Oh, I know.
Into the P.
It's potent.
It's potent on that front. So anyway.
Well, we are coming up on time, so I want to give everyone a chance to say anything else maybe they left on the table, and then we'll move on to our closing recommendations. Anyone?
I just want to underline the value of sticking with it, like the value of sitting with it. Like I'm the theologian in me's got to come out here and say, like, I actually think the irony here is that the only way to actually, if you've had this kind of traumatic experience of an eruption of the real into your life in a way that troubles your faith as it exists, the only way to have any kind of faith moving forward in the end is going to be to incorporate that, to sit with it and let it trouble you, right? Like as long as you're denying it, you're going to be doing what Paul just called idolatry. You're going to be building up a thing that some part of you will always know is fake, and you're going to be traumatizing and re-traumatizing yourself in that way. You just have to incorporate the experience, and actually I think art is a beautiful way to do it. But becoming less confident than you were, right? Like the people who can say, I always remember Rachel Held Evans saying sometimes, she said, when I'm, in those moments of my faith when I still believe in God, this is what I think and this is what I find beautiful and compelling, right? And being able to talk that way is, I think, in some ways the only way that we can move, that those of us who have and want to and value a faith life are going to hold on to it, is with that level of like openness and willingness to let ourselves be disturbed and changed by eruptions of the real.
Beautiful.
And my way of talking about that would be separating desire from the object, which means if I think the ethical position is actually to try to sustain desire. And if you get what you think you want, if you shut something down, if you scratch the itch, you actually are killing desire. You're trying to say, I'm thirsty, quickly, let me drink the Coke real fast because I want to kill that feeling of thirst. I'm hungry, so let me stuff something in my mouth real fast so that I'm not hungry anymore. I miss you, so I'm going to run to you right now so that I don't miss you anymore. But actually that feeling of desiring is where creativity and where life, and I would actually argue where love actually thrives. It's in desiring that we learn more of who we are and that we feel more alive. And I think part of what the capacity to sit in discomfort and being able to differentiate what's harm, like there is harmful discomfort, absolutely, but comfort itself is a form of death as well. If we're always trying to just make ourselves happy, we're often silencing this kind of beautiful disturbance that I think this song is inviting us into. And so that's why I don't think all music shouldn't be pop music and all art shouldn't be pretty and all movies shouldn't be comedies, because actually that works. There's nothing wrong with them, but they often work to close down our, like, what we think, like the capacity to sit in disturbance and to be open to more. And so I think being able to even sit with, not, I think I started with resisting understanding. I still don't think I understand the song, but I think staying in the not understanding is what allows it to keep speaking and us to keep learning and us to keep changing. Stay with the not understanding. I see this in my clinical work when, a patient will be talking and they're struggling with something and they're talking about it, and there's some kinds of insights that are really helpful, and I do want to say that. But there's a lot of insights that people have in therapy where they go, oh, it's my mom's fault. That's what it's about. And suddenly, instead of continuing to wrestle with who they are and how they've constructed their world, they found someone to blame, or they found an explanation to turn off the noise.
They put a name on it.
Exactly. And so now they don't have to think about it. And what happens is nothing about their life changes. They just have a way to explain away the problem. And I think that this kind of art resists that. And if you're willing to stay with it, I think it's an invitation to resist I'm just gonna make that go away real fast. But I'm going to allow it to keep disturbing me, to continue contaminating me, to go back to our discuss stuff.
I had a friend of mine fairly recently actually did an art show and asked me afterwards what I thought of the show. And I said, I kind of hate it, but I think that's a good thing. And I hope they understood that to be the compliment it was intended as, right? Like this is disturbing to me in ways that may be good or may be bad, but I want to sit with and process. So I think you're doing a thing that's important.
Yeah. Along the lines of the opposite of love is apathy.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, did you have any final notes?
No, I was scanning through. I don't.
We have a lot to chew on here. I mean,
there's a lot. Yeah,
very meaty conversation.
I love, obviously, I can really relate to the points Paul and Billy made of sitting with that discomfort, growing that sort of distress tolerance, and learning how to not react, and I guess, Paul, the right word is maladaptive behaviors that we form in response to all these things going on inside us. So yeah, I've got nothing of substance to offer other than an amen and a fist bump, or fist pump rather.
Awesome. Okay, well then I'll move us on to the final part, which is everyone gets to recommend something or someone or some piece of media. And I think I'm going to steal Billy's because it's so good. I saw The TV Glow as a movie that I did not like at all. In fact, I would go so far as to say I hated the experience of watching it. And at the same time, I am so glad that I sat in it and with it. And especially because as a very cis person, very straight person, I have cognitive empathy for the queer community 100%. And I am convinced that I want to be a helper and an ally. And what this film did for me was it gave me that visceral sense of, heart empathy of, ooh, I can feel this now. I can, and since I sat through that experience now, it informs how my allyship and just a broader experience of life. So yeah, highly recommend a miserable experience watching I Saw the TV Glow.
And we have so few ways of talking about the beauty and deep importance of those kinds of things. I think we don't have a way of valuing them typically well. So yeah.
What's it called? I Saw the TV Glow.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's a movie, a show.
Movie.
Okay, got it.
I think it's on HBO Max if you have that streaming service.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Very
I'm ready to have
artfully
my.
done.
I'm ready to have my world rock tonight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Make sure you're in a good place.
Don't make popcorn. Maybe wine.
And then do watch it. Oh my gosh.
What do you have to recommend, Ryan?
I will recommend Paul's Substack. I've gotten a lot. He's written a bunch of articles on AI and, with whether or not what we're engaging with is a subject. And it's not just, esoteric ramblings. It's actually a really important conversation. I guess the piece of TV media is the AI doc. It's available on Amazon Prime. It just came out, I think, in theaters. It's a very exploratory look at the effects AI is having on society and whatnot. And so it's pretty well regarded. My wife and I watched that last Friday, and it was unsettling, not in the pure doomerism sense, but it's a worthy watch for a number of reasons. So that would be, I guess, my piece.
Okay. Now you're making me jump in and give a recommendation specifically to Paul, which is the latest You Are Not So Smart podcast, number 337, about cognitive surrender. So this is researchers who are looking into a third type of thinking. You've got your thinking fast and thinking slow, and you also have your digital thinking or your offloaded cognition that, amazingly, their studies seem to be indicating that people are incorporating into assumptions about themselves. They are redefining themselves and their opinion and the way they're thinking through this cognitive surrender mechanism. So, yeah.
I'll check it out.
Okay, Billy, you're next.
Oh, okay. I'm going to stick with my tradition. Once you start a tradition with 2 episodes, I think you got to keep it. So I'm going to stick with another punk band. And since Paul is here, I'm gonna say positive things about somebody he loves. So just thinking through what we were talking about with the incapacity, like how art exists in this space where it is pointing past the bounds that language alone is able to kind of represent and sort of pointing beyond itself. I'm going to recommend a specific media experience or arts experience. And that is first, the first person to expose me to the way that art does that was a story about T.S. Eliot, in which he was asked, somebody asked him in an interview what the wasteland means. And he kind of gave the interviewer a long look and then sat back and just started saying the wasteland. He just started quoting the wasteland because he's like, the meaning of his action being like, if I could have said it as prose, I would have said it as prose. This thing can only be communicated in poetry. So sticking with Eliot, I'm going to say first, go and read the poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, which is also by T.S. Eliot. And then go listen to the Frank Turner song, I Knew Prufrock Before He Got Famous. Yes. Because if you do it, and you do it in that order, you will experience that particular folk punk song in a way, in a depth, and in a medium that otherwise it will never quite achieve. I think it's a beautiful song. I think it's a really, really well done song. It's fun. But it actually has depths which depend on a vibe that was established 100 years earlier by an American Anglophile poet.
Excellent. All right. Now we're down to Paul.
Yeah, I think my recommendation, and I always get nervous with these sorts of things, but I recently really enjoyed the film Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die.
Okay. Haven't seen it yet. Waiting for it to stream, but I will. I definitely am interested.
Yeah, it's Sam Rockwell. It's a fun film, very weird, but I think also really plays with this idea of desire and getting what you want and the risk of getting what you want. On top of some of the things we've been talking about around comfort, it's a dark comedy. There's some themes of of school shootings are in there. There's a lot of things happening. So obviously trigger warnings for those. Just be careful about yourself before you watch it. But yeah, it was disturbing to me in some really interesting ways that. I both found it was enjoyable, but then also disturbing that I enjoyed it and all that goes into that. The other thing I'll put out there, and this is because, Ryan, if you followed my Substack, I am a huge board game nerd, is I liturgically play a particular board game for the church for Carnival, which comes just before Lent, where you're supposed to this is the Mardi Gras where you put on masks and you allow the monsters within. You try to face the monsters within. So there is a board game from the publisher Whirligig by one of my favorite designers, Cole Worley. And the idea of the game is that you play as different families, wealthy families in England, who are all invested in the British East India Company. And so as a table, you play as different officers within the British East India Company. And what it forces you to do is to see the exploitation and looting of India is directly tied to your family's capacity to retire in wealth. Wow. And you get victory points by retiring. And it forces you to see that, and it forces you to see the incoherence of empire and to feel what happens when you are greedily using something that's meant to be, on one hand, cooperative, but at the kind of colonialization and objectification of other people, but then also at the objectification of the others around you. This last time we played, I won, and I felt horrible about it. And I think that's what the game invites you to. It actually, the rules start with, hey, talk to everybody at the table before you play this and make sure they're okay with playing it, because this is going to strike different people differently. But the invitation is to, and I would say as a white, European American, like, this hits kind of home as like, oh, this is a part of something that lives within me. And so John Company is second edition is the name of the game. All right. John Company second edition. But it is a big, the other part, it is a big, long, like 3-hour board game.
I have a friend who's been working on a video essay about colonialism and board games for years now. Have you ever seen the channel Pop Culture Detective?
I haven't seen that one. There's a great video essay. I'd recommend you look at. No pun intended. I think has one on colonialism and board game.
Oh, really?
Board games that sort of began to hint on that. And then Shut Up and Sit Down are reviewers. Their review of John Company has some really interesting things as well on that that I'd recommend for people.
Wow. So the recommendation dense episode here. All right. We are up against time, so I'm going to call it. I'm going to tell listeners, stay tuned. As soon as we're done here, we're going to play the 18-minute whatever it is, music in case you were insane and didn't want to listen to the song before this episode. Here you go. So we'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you, everyone.
Ta-ta.